You were not supposed to find this. That is the first thing you need to understand. The algorithm does not explain this. The timing does not explain this. The fact that you are here, right now, with this specific message playing in your ears or moving across your eyes, that is not the result of a recommendation engine. Something older than technology brought you to this moment, and somewhere beneath the noise of your day, you already feel that. You are not like other people. I know that sounds like something everyone wants to hear, but I am not saying it to make you feel special in the way a greeting card does. I am saying it because you have lived long enough inside the quiet ache of being different to know it is not always a gift. You have sat in rooms full of people and felt utterly alone. You have smiled at the right moments and said the right things and then driven home, wondering why nothing fits the way it seems to fit everyone else. You have wondered if something is wrong with you, and the answer is no. Nothing is wrong with you. What you are carrying is not a defect. It is a distinction. You are a chosen one. And before you scroll past that, or dismiss it as language designed to make you feel good, stay with me for just a moment. Because what I am about to describe is not flattery. It is a recognition. It is a naming of something you have been living with for years without a word for it. There are signs that only the ones who are chosen experience, and you are going to recognize them as I name them. The first is that your dreams have become sharper recently. Not more pleasant necessarily, but more vivid, more insistent, as though something is trying to get your attention while your conscious mind is finally quiet enough to receive it. The second sign is a frustration that has no clean object. You are not angry at a person or a situation exactly. It is more like a pressure behind your sternum that does not release, a sense that you are supposed to be doing something you have not yet been shown how to do. The third sign is that you have begun to feel like an outsider in spaces that used to feel comfortable. Old friendships feel like clothes that no longer fit. Conversations that once sustained you now leave you hollow. And you have not said this out loud because you do not want to seem ungrateful or difficult. The fourth sign is that the same message keeps finding you from different directions. A lyric in a song, a line in a book you picked up randomly, something a stranger said at a counter, something you read at 2 in the morning when you could not sleep. Different voices, same words, as though the universe is repeating itself because you have not yet said yes. And the fifth sign is the most important one, and also the quietest. Deep inside you, beneath the exhaustion and the doubt and the years of trying to make something work that was never meant to be your ceiling, there is a knowing, a stubborn, irritating, beautiful knowing that you were made for something that has not yet happened, that the story is not over, that the best chapters are not behind you. Heaven did not accidentally route this message to your screen. You are not a placeholder in someone else's story. You are not the supporting character in the life you have been living. You are the one. You have always been the one. And everything you have been through, every door that did not open, every season that felt like punishment, every relationship that ended before you were ready, every plan that collapsed at the worst possible moment, none of it was waste. None of it was random. You were being formed. You were being positioned. And the ones who are chosen are never positioned quickly, because the weight of what they are called to carry requires a foundation that takes time to build. You are an earth angel. I mean that in the most practical sense. You carry something into rooms that shifts the atmosphere. People come to you when they are broken, even strangers sometimes, as though they sense something in you that you yourself cannot always see. You feel things more deeply than the people around you. You grieve longer and love harder and hope more stubbornly then makes logical sense given what life has shown you. That is not weakness. That is assignment. You were not made to move through the world lightly. You were made to move through it meaningfully. And right now, at this specific point in your life, heaven has paused everything around you to deliver this message. Not the world, not everyone else, just you, just this moment. The people in your household may be asleep. The city outside your window may be going about its ordinary business. But in the dimension that matters most, something has stopped. Something has leaned in. Something ancient and faithful and completely certain of who you are is looking at you right now and saying, "It is time." The waiting season you have been living in has not been extended. It has not been indefinitely postponed. It has not been canceled due to your failures or your doubts or the years when you ran out of prayers and just sat in silence because that was all you had left to offer. The waiting season has not paused. It has ended. There is something that happens to a person who has been waiting for a long time. It is not just impatience. It is not simply frustration. It is a quieter, more corrosive thing than that. It is the slow erosion of the belief that what you were promised was ever real to begin with. And if you have been in a long season of waiting, you know exactly what I am describing, because it does not announce itself loudly. It creeps in through the back door of ordinary days. It disguises itself as maturity. It calls itself realism. And one morning, you wake up and you realize that somewhere along the way, you stopped expecting things to change. You stopped letting yourself want the full version of what you once believed was possible for your life. And you called that growing up, because it hurt less than calling it what it actually was, which was the slow death of hope. I want to name 4 things right now that you are going to recognize in your own body, in your own memory, as soon as I say them out loud. Because these 4 signs are the specific fingerprints of a person who is in what I call the appointed waiting season, and they are not signs of failure. They are signs of formation. The first is a wave of grief that rises without warning. Not grief over something that happened recently necessarily, but grief over old things, ancient things, things you thought you had made peace with. You are driving and a song comes on, and suddenly you are crying, and you cannot explain why. You are washing dishes and a memory surfaces, and the sadness that comes with it feels disproportionate to the moment. You think something is wrong with you. You think you should be over it by now. But what is actually happening is that the deep places in you are being cleared out. Grief is not always mourning a loss. Sometimes grief is the body releasing the weight it agreed to carry silently so that life could go on. The wave is not evidence that you are broken. It is evidence that something is thawing inside you, that the parts of you that went numb in order to survive are beginning to feel again, because the season ahead requires you to be fully alive, not partially alive, not protected. Alive, but present and open and willing to receive what is coming. The second sign is that familiar places and familiar people have begun to feel heavy in a way they did not before. The coffee shop you went to every Saturday, the group of friends you have known for years, the family dynamics that were always complicated but manageable. Suddenly they feel like a weight pressing down on you rather than a place you belong. And you feel guilty about that. You wonder if you are being ungrateful or difficult or proud. But what is actually happening is a form of holy dissonance. Your spirit is outgrowing containers that were right for a previous version of you and wrong for the version that is emerging now. You are not becoming cold. You are not becoming arrogant. You are becoming aligned. And alignment always feels like disruption before it feels like peace. The third sign is a recurring dream or a recurring image. of a door that has not yet opened. You may have had this dream literally, standing in a hallway, reaching for a handle, feeling the pull of what is on the other side without being able to see it. Or you may have experienced it as a waking sensation, a persistent image of a threshold you are approaching but have not yet crossed. That image is not your imagination being dramatic. It is your spirit communicating what your mind has not yet been given permission to fully articulate. There is a door. It is real, and you are closer to it than you have ever been. The fourth sign is that the same message keeps reaching you through different mouths, different mediums, different moments. You read something in a book that stops you. 3 days later, a stranger says something in a conversation you were not even fully participating in and uses the exact same words. Then a video finds you, a song finds you, a dream carries the same thread, and you start to wonder if you are imagining it. You are not imagining it. That is called confirmation. When heaven wants to make sure you do not miss something, it repeats itself until you cannot look away. Now, I want to talk about the things that the waiting has to cost you, not to open wounds, but to acknowledge them honestly. Because pretending they are not real does not honor what you have actually been through. The mislaid nights you cannot get back. The relationships that frayed at the edges while you were in survival mode and did not have the emotional bandwidth to tend to them properly. The version of yourself that used to dream out loud before life taught you to be quieter about it, more careful, more guarded. You have paid real prices in this season. The loneliness is real. The confusion about your own worth is real. The 3 a.m. moments when you lay in the dark and felt a weight on your chest that had no name and no obvious cause. All of it is real. And I am not here to rush past it with a spiritual affirmation. I want you to know that I see it, that what you have carried has been genuinely heavy, that the gap between who you know yourself to be and what your life looks like right now has been genuinely painful to inhabit. You are allowed to grieve that gap. You are allowed to say, "This has been hard," without immediately following it with, "But I know it will get better." The pain is valid on its own terms. But here is what I also want you to hear, and this is the part that changes everything. There is a difference, a profound and life-altering difference, between being overlooked and being positioned. And most people who are in a long waiting season have confused these two things, and that confusion is costing them the peace they were meant to have even in the middle of the wait. To be overlooked means you were seen and dismissed. It means someone evaluated you and decided you were not enough. It means your value was assessed and found to be insufficient for the opportunity. That is a painful thing, and it does happen in the world. And it is not the thing that is happening to you. What is happening to you is categorically different. You are being positioned. Positioning looks like being kept from certain rooms so that you will be ready for a different room entirely. Positioning looks like certain doors not opening so that you do not walk into something that looks like your blessing but would have become your cage. Positioning looks like delay that is actually protection. And the person who understands they are being positioned does not spend their energy resenting the wait. They spend it becoming who they need to be for the moment that is coming. The waiting has not been punishment. It has been preparation. And I know that sentence can sound hollow when you are in the middle of it, because preparation is not comfortable. A seed being prepared to break open is not having a pleasant experience. A muscle being prepared to carry more weight is in the process of being torn and rebuilt. Preparation is not a rest. It is a reconstitution. You are being reconstituted. Your theology of yourself, the story you tell about who you are and what you are capable of and what you deserve, is being rewritten from the inside. And that process does not feel peaceful while it is happening. It feels like falling apart. And what I want to offer you right now is the possibility that falling apart and being put back together better are the same event described from two different vantage points. You are not behind. I know it looks that way. I know there are people your age who seem to have figured things out that you are still circling. I know there are moments when you scroll through other people's lives and feel ashamed that you cannot quite name, a sense that the train left the station and you were standing on the platform. But I want to ask you something. What if the train you were supposed to be on has not come yet? What if the thing that looks like you missing the train is actually you being protected from arriving at the wrong destination at the wrong time? The timing of a chosen one is never the timing of the crowd. And if you have spent your whole life feeling slightly out of sync with everyone around you, I want to offer you a different interpretation of that feeling. You were not broken. You were on a different schedule, a sacred one. One that does not answer to the calendar of ordinary expectations. I want to close this part with something I need you to do right now if this is landing for you. If you have recognized yourself in any of these four signs, if the grief wave is familiar, if the heaviness of old spaces is familiar, if the dream of the door is familiar, if the repetition of the same message from different directions is familiar, I want you to type the words "I see it" in the comments below this video. Not for me, for yourself. Because sometimes naming a thing out loud, even in a comment box, is the beginning of claiming it. The act of typing those words is a declaration that you are no longer going to let this season pass without acknowledging that it means something, that you mean something, that what is happening to you is not random confusion. It is sacred formation. And if this message has found you at a moment when you needed it, if you feel the pull of it in a way that is hard to articulate, I want to ask you gently to like this video and to share it with one person in your life who is in a waiting season and does not have words for it yet. Not because numbers matter, but because there is someone in your contact list right now who woke up this morning feeling overlooked, feeling confused, feeling like they are running out of time. And what you could do in 30 seconds is put this message in front of them and let them know they are not alone. Subscribe if you want to stay close to this kind of content, because what is ahead of you in this season is going to require you to keep showing up for the version of yourself that is emerging. And this space is built for exactly that. You are not someone who was accidentally left behind. You are someone who was deliberately saved for this moment. There is a difference. And the sooner you begin to live from that difference, the sooner the evidence of it will begin to appear in the physical world around you. Fun 3. There is a moment in every long season where the waiting stops feeling like waiting and starts feeling like identity, where the delay becomes so familiar that you begin to build your life around it instead of through it, where you stop saying, "I am waiting for my breakthrough," and start saying, "This is just who I am, someone who almost makes it, someone who gets close but not quite, someone for whom things are always about to change but never quite do." And if you have reached that point, if the waiting has started to feel like a permanent address rather than a temporary stop, then what I am about to give you is not a motivational speech. It is a practical tool, something you can use today, right now, in whatever room you are sitting in, regardless of how long the season has been or how tired you are of trying. Because here is what I have learned about the ones who are chosen. They do not just need to hear that their breakthrough is coming. They need something to do with their hands while it arrives. They need a practice that keeps them tethered to the truth about who they are on the days when the feelings refuse to confirm it. They need what I am going to call a positioning protocol. Not a complicated spiritual discipline that requires hours of preparation. Not something that only works if you have the right environment or the right emotional state. Something simple, something portable, something that can be done in 7 minutes on a Tuesday morning when the coffee is still brewing and the weight of everything is already sitting on your chest before the day has even properly begun. This protocol has a name. I call it the return. Not because you are going back to something you lost, but because you are returning to the truth about yourself, that the noise of a long season has made it difficult to hear. You are returning to the signal beneath the static. You are returning to the version of yourself that existed before the waiting taught you to shrink. The return is 3 steps. Each step takes less than 2 minutes. Together they create a 7-minute practice that, if you do it consistently, will begin to shift not just how you feel, but how you perceive what is possible for your life. Step 1 is what I call the grateful interruption. And this is not a gratitude practice in the conventional sense. I am not asking you to make a list of things you are thankful for, although there is nothing wrong with that. I am asking you to do something more specific and more unusual. I want you to sit quietly for 60 seconds and think of one thing you are genuinely grateful did not happen. Not something you received, something you were spared. The relationship that looked like everything you wanted, but would have hollowed you out if it had lasted. The job you did not get, that would have trapped you in a life that was not yours. The plan that collapsed at what felt like the worst possible moment, but in retrospect put you on the road that eventually led you here. The prayer that was not answered the way you asked, because the answer that came instead was better, even if it did not feel that way at the time. Sit with one of those. Let yourself feel the fullness of what it means to have been protected from something you once desperately wanted, because here is what that practice does in your nervous system and in your spirit simultaneously. It reorients your perception of the waiting from something that has been taken from you to something that has been guarding you. And once you begin to see the waiting as protection rather than punishment, your relationship to your own life changes at a fundamental level. You stop fighting the season. You stop white-knuckling your way through it. You begin to move through it with a different quality of attention, looking not for evidence that you are behind, but for evidence that you are being guided. Step 2 is what I call the present tense declaration. And the specific declaration I want you to make in this step is tied directly to the understanding of time that I will go deeper on shortly. But for now, I want to give you the practical form of it. After your 60 seconds of the grateful interruption, I want you to speak out loud, even in a whisper if you need to, one sentence in the present tense about who you are becoming, not who you hope to become. Not who you used to be, not who you will be someday when things finally shift. Who you are right now, in this moment. The middle of the unfinished story, something like this. I am a person whose season is turning. I am someone whose preparation is complete, even if the evidence has not yet arrived. I am standing at the door that was built for me, and it is already beginning to open. The sentence is less important than the present tense, because your brain, your spirit, and the energetic field of your life respond differently to present tense statements than they do to future tense ones. A future tense statement keeps the thing perpetually ahead of you. A present tense statement begins the process of collapsing the distance between where you are and where you are going. Speak it out loud. Let your own voice carry it. There is something about hearing yourself say a true thing that the silence of simply thinking it cannot replicate. Step 3 is 7 minutes of intentional silence. And I want to be very specific about what I mean by this, because there is a version of silence that is simply the absence of noise. And then there is the kind of silence I am describing, which is an active, receptive stillness. You are not trying to empty your mind. You are not trying to achieve a meditative state. You are not doing anything that requires training or skill or prior experience with any kind of contemplative practice. You are simply sitting with your eyes closed if that is comfortable, and you are allowing. You are allowing the first 2 steps to settle into your body. You are allowing the declaration you just made to move from your throat into your chest and downward into the parts of you that have been braced and defended and waiting for the next blow. 7 minutes. That is all. And the reason 7 minutes matters, the reason that specific duration is not arbitrary, is something that sits at the intersection of ancient wisdom and modern neuroscience. And I want to explain that intersection to you now, not to impress you with information, but because understanding why something works makes you more likely to actually do it. And I want you to actually do this. Your brain operates on frequencies. This is not a metaphor. This is measurable, reproducible, documented neuroscience. Different states of consciousness correspond to different frequencies of electrical activity in the brain. When you are in a state of anxious wakefulness, grinding through the demands of ordinary life, your brain is predominantly operating in beta waves. High frequency, high energy, high tension. Beta is necessary for a lot of what daily life requires of you. But beta is also the state in which creativity is suppressed, intuition goes quiet, and the deeper knowing that lives beneath your analytical mind cannot surface. There is another frequency. It is called theta. It sits between 4 and 8 cycles per second. And theta is the state that children spend most of their waking hours in, which is why children learn at a rate that adults cannot replicate. Theta is the state of deep creativity, of open receptivity, of the kind of learning and knowing that bypasses the skeptical, defending, self-protective structures of the adult analytical mind. Theta is also the state that mystics and deep meditators enter, and that most adults lose easy access to somewhere in the process of growing up and being taught that the practical world requires a different kind of attention. And here is what is extraordinary. There is now decades of research demonstrating that the brain, when given the right acoustic cues, can be guided into a theta state with remarkable efficiency. The brain is a resonant organ. It synchronizes with patterns in its environment. This is called brainwave entrainment. And when researchers began to study how long a consistent, specific audio signal needed to play in order to reliably guide the brain into a theta state, what they found, across multiple studies and thousands of subjects, was that the threshold was right around 7 minutes. Not 20. Not an hour. 7 minutes of the right kind of sound, delivered through headphones or even through a good set of speakers, can begin to move your brain from the defended tension of beta into the open, creative, receptive state of theta. And this is why step 3 of the return is 7 minutes. Not because it is a spiritually significant number, although it has been considered one across many traditions for thousands of years, but because 7 minutes is the scientifically documented minimum required to begin the shift into the state of consciousness, where the deepest parts of you are most available, most open, and most capable of receiving what has been trying to reach you through all the noise. Dr. James Rivers, a neuroscientist with over 30 years of research dedicated specifically to the relationship between sound frequencies and brain states, a man trained at MIT and connected to research programs that have included collaboration with NASA, spent the better part of a decade studying why certain people seem to naturally access elevated states of creativity, insight, and what can only be described as inspired knowing, while others, equally intelligent and often more educated, seem locked out of those states no matter how hard they try. What he discovered is something that will become very important in a moment, and that I will come back to in the next part of what I want to share with you. But for right now, I want to bring you back to the return and ask you something simple and direct. Will you try it today? Not as a commitment to a lifelong practice, not as a promise to be a different person starting tomorrow. Just today, just once. The grateful interruption, the present tense declaration. 7 minutes of intentional silence. That is the return. You can do it in a parked car. You can do it at a kitchen table before anyone else wakes up. You can do it in a bathroom with the door locked if that is the only privacy your life currently offers. The environment does not need to be perfect. You do not need to be in a perfect emotional state. The only requirement is that you show up for yourself for 7 minutes and allow the shift to begin, because the shift is not something you have to manufacture. The shift is already in motion. What the practice does is not create the movement but attune you to it, make you sensitive to what is already changing in the invisible architecture of your life. And the ones who are chosen, the ones who are in the final stretch of a long waiting season, need that attunement more than they need more information, more strategy, more planning. They need to get quiet enough to hear what has been speaking to them all along. If the return is something you are willing to try, I want you to type the words "I am ready" in the comments below this video. Not as a performance, as a declaration. Because the moment you say "I am ready" out loud or in writing, something in you begins to reorganize around the truth of that statement. And you are ready. You may not feel ready, but readiness is not a feeling. Readiness is a decision. And somewhere inside the person who has survived everything that has tried to stop them from arriving at this moment, the decision has already been made. Now, I want to stay with you in this space for a moment before I go further, because what you just received in those 3 steps is not a small thing. The return is not a productivity hack or a morning routine designed to make you more efficient at being who you already are. It is a doorway. And what I am about to walk you through now is what lives on the other side of that doorway. The science, the story, and the specific tool that was built for exactly the person you are and exactly the season you are in. So stay with me, because this next part changes everything. There is something that the researchers did not expect to find when they began studying high performers, creative geniuses, people who seem to operate with an almost inexplicable level of insight and intuitive knowing. They expected to find higher IQ scores. They expected to find more sophisticated educational backgrounds or more rigorous training regimens. What they found instead was a frequency, a specific, measurable, reproducible pattern of electrical activity in the brain that showed up consistently in people who demonstrated what scientists began calling non-ordinary cognition, moments of sudden clarity, solutions that arrived whole and complete rather than being laboriously constructed, creative leaps that could not be traced back through any visible chain of logical reasoning, eureka moments that changed industries and lives, and sometimes the course of history. The frequency they found was not beta, the state of ordinary waking consciousness. It was not even alpha, the relaxed alertness that comes with a calm mind. It was theta and gamma, and specifically the relationship between them. And here is what that means for you, because this is where the spiritual language and the scientific language arrive at exactly the same destination from completely different directions. what the ancient traditions called anointing, what the mystics called divine inspiration, what you may have experienced as a sudden knowing that you cannot explain, what the chosen ones throughout history have described as the voice that speaks beneath the noise of ordinary life. That experience corresponds to a very specific neurological state, a state in which theta waves create a condition of open receptivity, while gamma waves, the fastest and most powerful of the brain's electrical signatures, fire patterns associated with insight, integration, and what researchers now describe as peak cognitive performance. Gamma is the frequency of the eureka moment. It is the frequency of the flow state. It is the frequency that fires in the brain of a master musician in the middle of a performance that transcends technique, in the brain of a scientist at the moment. A decade of fragmented data suddenly assembles itself into a coherent answer in the brain of a person who wakes at 3 in the morning with the solution to a problem they had almost given up on. And here is what is both heartbreaking and hopeful about this. Children live in theta naturally. Their brains default to the very state that adults spend enormous energy and money trying to recapture. A child's brain is a genius brain, not because children are more intelligent than adults, but because they have not yet been trained out of the frequency that makes profound learning, creativity, and intuitive knowing effortless. The socialization process, the educational system, the accumulation of stress and disappointment, and the defended posture that life teaches you to adopt in order to protect yourself, all of it gradually pulls the adult brain away from theta and locks it into the high-tension, high-frequency, low-creativity state of chronic beta, which means that what feels like diminishment, the sense that you were more alive, more creative, more open to possibility when you were younger, is not an illusion. Something was genuinely lost, not permanently, not irreversibly, but lost enough that recovering it requires intentional intervention. And this is precisely what Dr. James Rivers dedicated 30 years of his professional life to understanding. Dr. Rivers is not a wellness influencer. He is not a self-help personality who assembled a program from other people's research. He is a neuroscientist trained at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, one of the most rigorous scientific institutions in the world, who spent decades inside the research, inside the data, collaborating with teams that included programs connected to NASA, studying the single question that he believed was the most important question in cognitive science. Why do some people retain or regain access to elevated brain states while the majority of the population remains locked in the neurological equivalent of survival mode? And what, if anything, can be done to close that gap? What Dr. Rivers and his collaborators discovered across thousands of research hours and data from thousands of subjects is something called brainwave entrainment. And while the technical name sounds complicated, the underlying principle is elegant and ancient. The brain is a resonant organ. It does not simply generate its own frequencies in isolation from its environment. It listens, it synchronizes, it attunes to patterns of sound and rhythm in the world around it, the way a tuning fork will begin to vibrate at the frequency of another tuning fork held near it. This is not metaphor. This is physics, and it means that the right kind of sound, delivered in the right way, can guide your brain into theta with a reliability and efficiency decades of meditation practice cannot always achieve. The tool that Dr. Rivers built from this research uses a combination of binaural beats and isochronic tones, sound frequencies that are precisely calibrated to the specific patterns that the research showed were most effective at guiding the brain first into theta and then into the theta-gamma combination that corresponds to peak insight and elevated cognition. The audio is 7 minutes long. Not because 7 is a spiritually significant number, though I am not unaware that it is, but because 7 minutes is the threshold that the data consistently identified as the minimum duration required to produce a reliable entrainment effect in a resting adult brain. Less than 7 minutes produced inconsistent results. 7 minutes or more produced results that were not just statistically significant, but, in many cases, experientially dramatic. This tool is called the Genius Wave. And before I tell you what it costs and where to find it, I want to tell you who it was built for. Because it was not built for people who have everything working and simply want to optimize. It was built for people in exactly the situation you are in right now. People who know, at a level deeper than logic, that they were made for something significant, but who have spent years fighting a gap between that knowing and the evidence in their daily lives. People who are tired in a specific way, not the tired of someone who has been working too hard, but the tired of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time without being sure that anyone else can see the weight. People who have tried the conventional approaches and found that information alone does not close the gap. People who need something that works at the level of the brain's actual operating frequency, not just at the level of conscious intention. Want to tell you about a woman I will call Sarah. She came to the Genius Wave after what she described as the year everything went sideways at once. Her marriage had ended. Her business, which she had spent 4 years building, had stalled in a way she could not diagnose or fix, no matter how many strategies she tried. She was waking at 4 every morning with a weight on her chest that she had no name for. She had tried therapy, which helped some things but not the specific thing she was describing, which was a sense of cognitive fog, a feeling that her own best thinking was somehow unavailable to her, that the person she knew herself to be at her sharpest and most creative was locked behind a door she could not find the handle for. She started using the Genius Wave, not because she believed it would work, but because she had run out of reasons not to try. She used it for 7 minutes every morning before she did anything else. Within the first week, she noticed that the quality of her thinking had shifted. Not dramatically, not in a way she could have pointed to as proof of anything, but quieter, more spacious, less reactive. By the end of the 3rd week, she had a conversation with a potential business partner that she described as the clearest, most creative conversation she had participated in years. Ideas were coming to her in the middle of the conversation that she could not have generated in her most focused planning sessions before. By the end of the 2nd month, the business had pivoted in a direction that she said felt obvious in retrospect, but that she had been completely unable to see before the fog lifted. She sent Dr. Rivers a message that said simply, "I feel like myself again, and I think I am a better version of that self than I was before everything fell apart." I want to tell you about a man I will call Marcus. 53 years old, had spent 20 years in a career that paid well and meant nothing to him. Had a recurring dream, a specific one, about standing in a field with a door in the middle of it and no building around the door. Just the door standing alone in the grass, and he always woke up before he opened it. He started using the Genius Wave because his daughter sent him a link, and he trusted her judgment even when he did not trust his own. He told me that the first time the audio played all the way through and he sat in the silence afterward, he cried. He could not explain why. He said it was not sad crying. It was more like the release of something that had been held under pressure for a very long time. Within a month, he had started the creative project he had been telling himself he would start for 15 years. Within 6 months, that project had become the beginning of a second career that he described as the first thing in his adult life that felt like it was actually his. I know that some of you are hearing this and thinking that $39 is not nothing. I want to acknowledge that, honestly and directly, because I am not interested in pretending that money is not a real consideration for real people. $39 is a meal out. It is a streaming subscription. It is a small but real thing to spend on something you are not certain will work. I hear that. I want to say 2 things in response. The first is that the regular price of the Genius Wave is $49, and what is available right now, through the link in the pinned comment below this video, is a easy, reduced price of $39 that is specific to this window of time and is not guaranteed to remain available. The second thing I want to say is this. You have spent more than $39 on things that promised less and delivered even less than that. You have spent more than $39 on a season of something you stopped watching after 2 episodes, on a book you bought and never finished, on a supplement that sat on your shelf until it expired. $39. For a tool that is backed by 30 years of neuroscience research and that comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, meaning that if you use it for 3 months and feel that it has not delivered anything of value, you get your money back in full. No questions and no complications. That is not a risk. That is an invitation. The 90-day money-back guarantee is real. Dr. Rivers built it into the offer because he knows what the research shows, and the research shows that the people who use this tool consistently experience results that they want to keep. The guarantee is not a marketing gimmick. It is a reflection of confidence in what the science has built. One thing I need to say clearly before we move forward. There are imitation products that have appeared using similar language and similar packaging. The Genius Wave is a specific, proprietary audio program developed by Dr. James Rivers and his research team. The only place to purchase the authentic program at the $39 price with the 90-day guarantee is through the link in the pinned comment below this video. Do not purchase from any other source. What you will receive from any other source is not the same product and will not carry the same guarantee. And I want to say one final thing about timing, because timing is something I take seriously in this space. The $39 price is not permanent. It is available because of a specific promotional window that is tied to a limited number of purchases. When that number is reached, the price returns to $49, and there is no way to know from the outside how close that threshold is. I'm not saying this to create pressure. I am saying it because I would rather you have the information and make your own decision than not have it and wonder later why you waited. The window is open right now. The door is right there. And you have already done the harder thing, which is getting to the place where you are ready to walk through it. Before I move forward, I want to stay in this place with you for just a moment longer, because what I am about to say is not a pivot away from what we have been building together. It is the foundation beneath it. You cannot fully receive what is coming without first allowing yourself to honestly acknowledge what the long season has taken from you. Not in a way that keeps you there, not in a way that becomes a permanent residence in grief, but in the honest, clear-eyed way of someone who looks at the full ledger of a difficult chapter and refuses to pretend that the losses were not real just because the story is not over. Because here is what I have noticed about people who are chosen and who have been in a long waiting season. They have become very good at spiritual bypassing. They have learned to reach for the reframe so quickly that they never actually sit with the wound. Someone asks them how they are doing, and they say they are trusting the process. Someone asks them about the dream that has not manifested yet, and they say they know God's timing is perfect. And both of those things can be true and also be used as a way of not feeling the specific, textured, human pain of years going by while the thing you were made for remains just out of reach. I am not going to do that to you today. I am not going to rush you to the silver lining before we have properly acknowledged the cloud. So let me ask you something directly. How many years has it been? Not since you first believed something was possible for your life. Since you began to wonder if you had been wrong about it. How many years have you been in the particular kind of suspension where you are not quite giving up, but you are also no longer fully expecting? Where you have made a kind of uneasy peace with the gap between who you know yourself to be and what your life currently looks like. Because for some of you, it has been 3 years. For some of you, it has been 7. For some of you, if you are honest, it has been longer than you are comfortable saying out loud, because saying it out loud makes it feel more permanent somehow, makes the waiting feel more like a verdict than a season. And what I want to name, specifically and without softening it, is what those years have actually taken from you. Not metaphorically, not in the abstract language of spiritual growth and character development. Concretely, in the currency of real life, they have taken relationships that should have been built. There are connections that did not deepen the way they would have if you had been more available, more present, less consumed by the underground work of trying to keep yourself afloat. There are people who reached toward you during this season and found less of you than they were hoping for. Not because you did not love them, but because survival takes up a particular bandwidth that leaves less room for the ordinary, beautiful, unremarkable work of building something with another person. Over time, there are friendships that thinned. There are romantic possibilities that you did not pursue because you were not in a place where you could show up fully. And you knew it, and you made the quiet, painful decision to wait until you were more whole before you let someone else see all of you. And the waiting stretched on, and those possibilities closed. And you carry that. They have taken vocational ground that should have been covered. There is a version of your story in which the thing you were made to do is already 5 years further along than it is right now, in which you made the pivot earlier, or the resources arrived sooner, or the door opened at the moment you first knocked rather than years later. And you can see that version of yourself clearly enough to feel its absence. The career that should have gone further by now. The creative work that should have more of a body to it. The impact that should have reached more people. You have watched others move through territory that was supposed to be yours, not in a bitter way necessarily, but in the specific, quiet ache of someone who knows the landscape because they were made for it, and who is watching it from a distance they did not choose. They have taken your willingness to dream out loud. This one is perhaps the most costly and the least visible. Because when you first arrived in this season, you still talked about what you believed was coming. You still told people about the vision, the plan, the thing you knew was in you waiting to be expressed. And somewhere along the way, the responses you received, the skepticism dressed up as realism, the blank looks from people who loved you but could not see what you could see, the silence from heaven during the periods when you needed confirmation the most, all of it gradually taught you to keep the big things private, to stop sharing the full version of what you believed was possible, to offer people the smaller, more defensible version of your dreams because the full version had been met with too much silence and too much doubt for you to keep putting it out there unprotected. And now you carry the full version alone, which is its own particular loneliness. And they have taken, perhaps most importantly, an easy confidence in your own knowing. There was a time when you trusted yourself more readily, when the voice inside you that said this is the direction carried more authority in your own interior life. And years of waiting, years of praying for things that did not arrive on the schedule you believed they were supposed to. Years of being certain about something that then did not happen the way you were certain it would, have made you a more cautious interpreter of your own inner life. You second-guess more now. You hold your own instincts more loosely, more suspiciously, more at arm's length. And that is not growth. That is the accumulated scar tissue of a long season, and it is costing you access to the very guidance system you are going to need most in the chapter that is opening. I am not going to reframe any of that right now. I am not going to tell you that the relationships that did not develop were not meant to develop, or that the vocational ground you did not cover was ground you were not ready for, or that the dreams you stopped saying out loud were too small for what was actually coming. I am not going to tell you any of that yet. I am just going to say, I see what it cost, and it was a real cost, and you paid it. And the fact that you are still here, still showing up, still watching a video like this one, because some part of you refuses to completely let go of the belief that your story is not finished, that is not nothing. That is extraordinary. That is the specific, stubborn, unreasonable hope that is the hallmark of every person who was made for something that has not yet fully arrived. I want to tell you about a man whose name you know. His name is Joseph, and I am not going to tell you the triumphant version of his story right now, because that is not where I want to meet you. I want to tell you the part that does not get preached about as often, because it is less comfortable and more honest. Joseph was 17 years old when he received the clearest vision of his future that any young person could be given. He saw it in images, in symbols, in the specific language of divine communication that left no room for ambiguity. He knew what he was called to. He knew the scope of it. He knew the significance of it. And then his life went in the exact opposite direction for 13 years, not for a season, not for a difficult year, for 13 years. He was betrayed by the people who should have been his most steadfast protectors. He was sold. He was enslaved. He was falsely accused of something he did not do. He was imprisoned for a crime that was not a crime. And in the middle of all of that, there is no recorded moment where heaven appeared to him and said, I know this is hard, but here is the timeline, and here is the reason, and here is what you need to know to make this make sense. There is just the silence, and the prison, and the years, and the specific texture of a person who received a profound promise and then watched their life move in a direction that seemed to make that promise impossible. I am not going to tell you yet what happened next, because I do not want you to rush to the resolution. I want you to sit for a moment in the part of the story that Joseph actually lived, because that part is where you are living right now. In the years between the promise and the provision, in the space between the vision and the evidence, in the place where you know what you were made for and cannot yet see how the current circumstances of your life could possibly become the road that leads there. And what I want you to take from Joseph in this moment is not a lesson about patience, because patience has been preached at you enough, and it has not helped as much as the people who preached it hoped it would. What I want you to take is the simple weight-bearing fact of his endurance. He did not become someone else while he was waiting. He did not decide that the vision was wrong because the circumstances contradicted it. He did not rewrite the story of who he was to match the smallness of what his life looked like from the outside. He remained in the deepest part of himself, The person who had been shown something, even when everything around him said that person was delusional. That is who you are. That is what this season has not been able to take from you, even though it has tried. Beneath the second guessing and the eroded confidence and the dreams you stopped saying out loud, there is still a person who knows something, who has been shown something, whose story has not arrived at its final page. And in the chapter that is coming, that knowing is going to become the most valuable thing you possess. Not your credentials, not your network, not your strategy. The knowing that survived the long season intact, that is the thing that is going to matter most in what is ahead. Hold it carefully. It is more precious than you currently believe it to be. I want to give you something now that is going to permanently change the way you interpret your own story. Not a feeling, not an encouragement, a framework, a way of seeing time itself that the ancient world understood with a clarity that the modern world has almost entirely lost. And that loss, I want to suggest to you, is not accidental. Because when you lose the ability to correctly interpret the time you are in, you lose the ability to correctly interpret yourself within it. And a chosen one who has lost their framework for understanding their own season is a person who is vulnerable to the most dangerous misreading of all, which is the belief that they are behind when they are actually exactly on time. In the ancient Greek world, there were two words for time. They were not synonyms. They were not interchangeable. They described two fundamentally different experiences of reality that happened to share the same general category of the word time, the way that hunger and appetite share a general category but describe entirely different states of being. The first word was chronos. You recognize it. It is the root of the word chronological. It is the time of clocks and calendars and deadlines and schedules. It is sequential time. It is the time that measures how long you have been waiting, how many years have passed, how far behind the expected schedule your life currently sits. Chronos is the time that says you are 37 and you thought you would be further along by now. Chronos is the time that measures the gap between where you are and where you expected to be. Chronos is the time that has been making you feel late. The second word was kairos, and kairos describes something that chronos cannot measure and cannot contain. Kairos is the appointed moment. It is the right time, not in the sense of the convenient time or the expected time or the time that fits neatly into the schedule that you or anyone else designed. It is the time that is cosmically correct. The moment that arrives not because the calendar said it should, but because everything that needed to happen before it has finally happened. In Kairos time, there is no such thing as late. There is only the moment that has not yet come and the moment that has now arrived. And the arrival of a Kairos moment is not announced in advance. It does not give you a countdown. It does not appear on the schedule. It simply arrives. And when it does, the people who have been in Chronos time, grinding through the calendar, counting the days, measuring the distance, those people often miss it. Because they have been looking in the wrong direction. They have been watching the clock when they should have been watching for the signs. You have been living in Chronos time. You have been counting the years. You have been measuring the distance between the promise and the provision. You have been calculating how late you are by the standards of a timeline that was never the right framework for your particular story. And what I want to offer you right now is a permission to step out of Chronos entirely, to stop measuring your life against a calendar that was never calibrated to your calling. Because what you are in right now is not a Chronos delay. It is a Kairos approach. The appointed moment is not running behind schedule. It is arriving exactly when it was always going to arrive, which is now. which is this season, which is the specific threshold you are standing at in this exact chapter of your life. But I want to go even deeper than Kairos, because there is another word, an ancient Hebrew word, that describes something even more specific about what the waiting has actually been doing in and for you. The word is kava, and in its most common English translations, it gets rendered as the verb to wait, which is accurate but incomplete in a way that has cost the modern reader something important. Because when we read the word wait in our contemporary context, we picture passivity. We picture someone sitting still, enduring the passage of time, doing nothing while hoping that something will eventually change. We picture the waiting room at a doctor's office. We picture someone watching the door. That is not what kava means. Kava is a word that comes from the imagery of rope making. Specifically, the process of taking multiple strands of fiber, each one individually weak and easily broken, and twisting them together under tension to create something that is exponentially stronger than any single strand could be on its own. Kava is the waiting that is simultaneously the making. It is the process in which the separate threads of your experience, your gifts, your wounds, your failures, your moments of unexpected grace, your years of grinding endurance, your capacity for empathy that was forged in the fire of your own suffering, your stubborn refusal to completely let go of the vision, even when everything around you said it was unreasonable. To hold on, all of those individual strands are being twisted together under the tension of the waiting season into something that is going to be strong enough to carry the weight of what is coming. You have not been wasting time. You have been making rope. Every year that felt like it was being subtracted from your story was actually adding another strand to the cord. Every relationship that ended and left you holding the grief and having to integrate it. Every plan that collapsed and forced you to develop a resilience you did not know you had. Every moment of being misunderstood that drove you deeper into the interior life where the real formation was happening. All of it was kava. All of it was the making of the thing that is going to hold when the wait finally comes. You are not delayed. You are being assembled. And assembly, by its nature, cannot be rushed without compromising the integrity of what is being built. Now, I want to bring these two frameworks together and apply them directly to where you are standing right now. Because the combination of kairos and kava gives you something that neither concept provides alone. It gives you a way to hold both the urgency and the peace simultaneously. The urgency of kairos, the sense that the appointed moment is not somewhere in the distant future, but is arriving right now, pressing up against the present moment like a tide that has finally reached its height. And the peace of kava, the deep, rooted, unshakable, knowing that the waiting was not waste, that the strands are strong, that you are more prepared for this moment than you could have manufactured yourself even if you had tried. And here is what that combination produces in a person who truly receives it. It produces what I can only describe as a sacred settledness, not complacency, not the resigned acceptance of someone who has stopped expecting change, but the quiet, grounded, eyes-open readiness of someone who knows that the thing they have been waiting for is not coming eventually. It is coming now. And they are not scrambling. They are not white-knuckling. They are simply standing at the threshold with everything the long season built in them, finally understanding that the building was the preparation, and the preparation is complete. I want to tell you something about the specific quality of this moment in your life. There is a reason the message found you now and not 6 months ago. There is a reason you are at this particular point in the narrative and not an earlier one. And the reason is not that heaven was slow or careless or indifferent. to what you were going through in the seasons before this one. The reason is that Kairos moments do not arrive until the kava work is finished. The appointed time does not come until the rope has enough strands in it to hold what it needs to hold, and something in the economy of your formation, something that you cannot fully see from the inside of your own story, reached its completion recently. The strands twisted into place, the threshold appeared, and the message found you. What Kairos means for you practically is this: the framework you have been using to evaluate your own progress, the one that measures you against a timeline built from other people's expectations and your own early projections about when things were supposed to happen, that framework is now obsolete. You do not need to abandon ambition. You do not need to stop working toward the things you know you are called to. But you do need to release the specific anxiety of feeling late, because late is a Chronos concept and you are in a Kairos moment, and a person who is standing in Kairos time and spending their energy on Chronos anxiety is like someone who has finally arrived at the banquet and is standing at the table calculating how long the journey took instead of sitting down to eat. What kava means for you practically is this: the years you spent wondering if the waiting was making you weaker were years in which the waiting was actually making you stronger in ways that were not visible from the outside or even always from the inside. The endurance you developed, the depth of character that suffering and sustained hope in the face of silence produces in a person, the capacity for compassion that comes from having genuinely needed it yourself and not always received it. The wisdom that cannot be read in a book or learned in a classroom, but only lived your way into through seasons of genuine uncertainty. All of that is now part of the rope. All of that is now load-bearing capacity in the person you have become. And the person you have become is exactly the person that the next chapter requires. Here is the declaration I want to leave with you from this part of what we are building together. And I want you to say this, either out loud or silently, with the full weight of everything we have just walked through together as its foundation. I am not behind. I am not overlooked. I am not a person to whom things almost happen. I am a person standing in Kairos time, assembled by the kava of a long season, arriving at the appointed moment, with everything I need to receive what was always intended for me, the door you have been seeing in your dreams, the one that is standing in the middle of the field with no building around it, the one that you always wake up before you open. I want you to know something about that door. It does not require you to figure out the mechanism. It does not require you to earn the right to turn the handle. It requires only one thing from you, and that is the willingness to stop standing in front of it, measuring how long it has been closed, and to simply reach out your hand. If this framework of Kairos and kava has given you something you did not have before you started watching this video, if it has offered you a new lens through which to see the season you are in and the person you have become inside it, I want you to type the words "I receive it" in the comments below, because reception is an active posture. It is not passive acceptance. It is the deliberate, chosen, intentional opening of yourself to what is being offered. And what is being offered right now, in this Kairos moment, at the end of a long kava season, is more than you have allowed yourself to fully imagine in a very long time. There is a particular kind of knowing that begins to move in a person right before everything shifts. It does not announce itself loudly. It does not arrive with dramatic signs or overwhelming emotion. It comes quietly, like the first warmth of a morning before the sun has fully risen, like the almost imperceptible change in the quality of air that happens right before rain. And if you have been paying attention, if the practices, and the frameworks and the honest acknowledgement of everything this season has cost. You have created even a small amount of interior space. You may already be feeling it. A subtle but unmistakable sense that something is in motion. That the atmosphere around your life is beginning to change in a way that your eyes cannot yet fully confirm, but that something deeper in you has already begun to register. I want to name 3 specific things that are right now in the process of shifting for you. Not eventually, not when you get it together, or when you finally arrive at the right spiritual posture, or when you have done enough of the inner work to deserve what is coming. Right now, in this season, in the weeks and months that are immediately ahead of you, these 3 things are moving in the invisible architecture of your life, whether or not you can see the evidence of them yet, in the physical world around you. And what I want to do is describe them specifically enough that when they begin to manifest, you will recognize them for what they are and not talk yourself out of receiving them. The first thing that is shifting is your relational landscape. And I want to describe this with precision because it is not going to look the way most people expect it to look. When they hear the phrase, new relationships are coming, it is not going to feel like a flood of new people suddenly appearing in your life, all of them perfectly aligned and spiritually mature and ready to walk alongside you into your purpose. It is going to feel, at first, like subtraction, like a further thinning of the connections that have already been loosening throughout this season. People who have been in your life for a long time are going to create distance, or you are going to feel yourself creating it naturally, without effort and without the guilt that used to accompany that kind of separation. And what I need you to understand is that this is not loss. This is preparation of space. The relational landscape that is being cleared because what is coming next requires room. The people who are aligned with the next chapter of your life cannot fully enter while the space is still crowded with connections that belong to a previous version of your story. This does not mean the people who are moving away from you are bad people, or that the relationships were without value. It means seasons have endings, and they also have beginnings. And the beginning of a new relational season in your life requires the completion of the previous one. You are going to meet people in the coming months who feel immediately familiar in a way that cannot be explained by the length of the acquaintance. People who seem to already understand something about you that it took years for the people in your current circle to even partially grasp. People who are walking in the same direction you are walking and who are at exactly the right point in their own journey to be genuinely useful to yours and to receive what you have to offer in return. What you should not do in this season is force the old connections to stay. Do not spend your energy trying to maintain relationships that are naturally completing themselves. Do not make yourself smaller or quieter or less than what you have become in order to remain comfortable to people who knew you before this season of formation. And do not rush toward the new connections out of the loneliness of the transition. What you can trust is this: the people who are coming have been positioned for this exact moment in your life with the same intentionality that this moment in your life has been positioned for you. The alignment is not accidental, and when it arrives, you will feel it in a way that is unmistakable. The second thing that is shifting is your sense of purpose, and specifically the way that sense of purpose communicates itself to you in the daily texture of your life. For a long time in this season, the question of what you are supposed to be doing with your life has felt like a heavy, unanswerable weight. You have known, at a general level, something about your calling. You have felt the direction of it even when you could not see the path clearly. but the specific next step has been obscured in a way that has been profoundly frustrating for someone who is wired to move, to build, to contribute. That obscurity is about to change. What is coming is not a sudden, complete revelation of every detail of the plan. That is not how Kairos works, and it is not how Kava preparation delivers its results. What is coming is one clear step, just one. But the quality of its clarity is going to be unlike anything you have experienced in a long time, because it will not come as a loud, dramatic prompting that demands your attention. It will come as a quiet, simple, almost obvious knowing that settles into you and does not leave it. Will feel less like inspiration and more like remembering something you already knew but had somehow forgotten. And when it comes, I want to encourage you to do the thing that the long season has trained you not to do, which is to act on it without waiting for every subsequent step to be visible first. The chosen ones who move into their next chapter do not do so because they can see the full staircase. They do so because they were willing to take the step they could see, and then the next one became visible only after they committed to the first. What you should not do in this moment is wait for certainty before you move. Certainty is a chronos concept. It measures probability against risk and only commits when the odds are sufficiently favorable. The kind of movement that Kairos moments require is different in quality. It is more like stepping onto a path that you cannot fully seize because the light is only illuminating the ground directly beneath your feet, trusting that the next section will be lit when you arrive at it. What you can trust is that the step that comes to you with that quality of settled clarity, the quiet one, the obvious one, the one that feels more like recognition than inspiration, that step is the right one. Take it. The third thing that is shifting is your relationship with resources and opportunity. And this is the one that I want to describe most carefully, because it is the one that the long season has done the most damage to in terms of your expectations and your ability to receive. In the waiting season, you learned a particular relationship to scarcity, not necessarily financial scarcity, though for many of you that has been real, but a scarcity of the specific resources that your purpose requires. The right connections not appearing at the right time. The funding, or the platform, or the audience, or the recognition that seemed to go to people who appeared to be doing less significant work. The opportunities that came close and then redirected themselves towards someone else. You learned, through repetition, to expect that the resources you needed for the thing you were called to do would be difficult, if not impossible, to access. That expectation is about to be interrupted, not all at once, and not in a way that removes the requirement of your participation and your faithfulness to the step you have been given, but in a way that is qualitatively different from everything you have experienced in the waiting season. The difference is going to feel like this. Instead of striving toward resources that always seem to be one step further away than you can reach, you are going to begin to notice that the right things are finding you, not that you have stopped working or stopped being intentional, but that the quality of your effort is going to shift from fighting for access to receiving your portion. There's a phrase I want to offer you for this. You are moving from striving to stewarding. The striving belongs to the season that is ending. The stewarding belongs to the season that is beginning. And stewarding feels entirely different from the inside. It feels quieter, more confident, less desperate, because desperation belongs to someone who is not sure they are going to get what they need, and the person you are becoming, the person that the Kava season has been assembling, knows at a level deeper than feeling that they are going to be provided for. What you should not do in this season is receive the provision with the grip of someone who is afraid it will be taken away. Scarcity thinking does not disappear automatically just because the season changes. You are going to have to deliberately choose the posture of an open hand rather than a closed fist. You are going to have to practice receiving without immediately calculating when it will run out. What you can trust is that the provision that is coming is not a one-time windfall followed by a return to lack. It is the beginning of a new normal. A different relationship between your faithfulness and what that faithfulness attracts into your life. I want to give you something practical to do with these 3 shifts as they begin to manifest. For the relational shift, I want you to practice what I call the gracious release. When you feel a connection naturally completing itself, instead of holding on or feeling guilty for letting go, I want you to silently offer a blessing to the person who is moving out of your active life, and then open your hands as a physical symbol of making room. For the purpose shift, I want you to write down, in the simplest possible language, the one step that has been quietly presenting itself to you and that you have been talking yourself out of. Not the plan, not the strategy, just the one step. And then I want you to do one concrete thing in the direction of that step before the day is over. And for the resource shift, I want you to begin practicing what I call noticing the provision. Every time something arrives that helps you move toward your calling, no matter how small, I want you to name it out loud. Because what you notice and name, you train yourself to see more of. And the person who is learning to see provision where they once only saw lack is the person who is making the internal shift that the external shift requires. The atmosphere around your life is changing. The evidence may not be fully visible yet in the physical world, but in the realm where the real movement happens first, the movement is already underway. And the person who knows how to read that kind of movement, who has been trained by the long season to look beneath the surface of circumstances for the deeper current, that person is positioned to catch what is coming in a way that someone who has been living entirely on the surface level cannot. If you can feel even one of these 3 shifts beginning to stir in your own life, even as a faint resonance rather than a fully articulate knowing, I want you to type the words "I am ready now" in the comments below. Because readiness in this season is not the absence of fear or uncertainty. It is the decision to move toward what you sense is coming, even while the full picture is still assembling itself. You are ready. You have been ready longer than you know. And the season that is opening in front of you is about to make that readiness unmistakably evident to you and to everyone who is watching your life. The 3 shifts I just described to you are already in motion. And I want you to hold that in the front of your awareness as I speak to you now. Because what I am about to offer you is not separate from what we have been building together. It is the deepest layer of it. It is the part that goes beneath the science and beneath the framework and beneath even the honest acknowledgement of what the waiting has cost. It is the part where I speak directly to who you are, not what you have been through, not what is coming, but the specific nature of the person who survived the long season and arrived at this threshold intact. Because there is a name for what you have become, and I do not mean a label or a category. I mean a true name, the kind of name that the ancient world understood as a description of essence rather than merely a word for identification. In Scripture, and in many of the world's oldest wisdom traditions, to be given a new name was to be recognized as having become something that the previous name could no longer contain. Abram became Abraham, Jacob became Israel, Simon became Peter. The new name was not a replacement for the old identity. It was an acknowledgement that the formation was complete, that what had been in the process of becoming had now arrived at a sufficient expression of itself to be called by its true title. And the name that belongs to you, the name that the long season has been forging in you through every year of endurance, every night of confusion, every morning when you chose to keep going without evidence that keeping going was the right decision. That name is this. You are a cycle breaker. I want you to sit with that for a moment before I explain it, because the explanation is less important than the initial reception. Let it land. Let it move through whatever defenses you have constructed against being seen too clearly or claimed too boldly. Because this is not flattery, and it is not a generic spiritual affirmation. This is a recognition of something specific that has been happening in and through you during the very season you were tempted to read as failure. A cycle breaker is a person who was born into patterns, inherited patterns, generational patterns, cultural patterns, relational patterns that were never meant to be permanent. Patterns of lack, or patterns of silence, or patterns of smallness, or patterns of deferred dreams and unrealized potential that have been passing from one generation to the next, like a baton that nobody wanted to carry, but nobody knew how to put down. A cycle breaker is the person in the lineage who was given the specific combination of awareness and endurance and interior strength required to be the one who does not pass the pattern forward, who absorbs it, who transforms it, who transmutes it into something entirely different through the alchemy of their own lived experience. And here is what makes being a cycle breaker both extraordinary and specifically painful. The process of breaking a cycle requires you to fully feel the weight of it before you are free of it. You cannot break what you cannot see. You cannot transform what you have not honestly encountered. And so the cycle breaker often spends a significant portion of their life in what looks, from the outside, like being trapped in the very pattern they were meant to end. They struggle in ways that their parents struggled. They face the specific fears and limitations and relational dynamics that their lineage has been rehearsing for generations. And people around them, people who do not understand what they are witnessing, sometimes interpret this as failure or weakness or a lack of spiritual development. But what is actually happening is something entirely different. The cycle breaker is not failing to escape the pattern. The cycle breaker is going all the way into the pattern, feeling the full weight of it, understanding it from the inside in a way that surface-level exposure never could have produced. And then, through the specific combination of faith and endurance, and the gradual formation of a self that is strong enough to carry something the previous generations could not, choosing a different way forward. Not for themselves alone, for everyone who comes after them, for the children who will not have to carry what they carried, for the communities that will be touched by someone who learned how to transform rather than merely transfer the weight. That is who you are. That is what this season has been producing. And the reason the cycle breaker's season is always longer than seems fair or necessary is because the pattern being broken is older than the individual. You are not just doing the work of one lifetime. You are doing the accumulated work of several. And the fact that it has taken time is not evidence of inadequacy. It is evidence of the scale of what you were sent to accomplish. I want to take you through a brief visualization now, and I want you to engage with it as fully as you are able. If you need to close your eyes, close them. If you are driving or doing something that requires your eyes to remain open, simply allow the images to move through your awareness without trying to hold them. Picture yourself standing at a threshold, not a door in a wall, but an actual threshold, a line in the ground, a place where one territory ends and another begins. You are standing just behind it, and as you stand there, I want you to turn and look at the ground behind you, at the path that brought you to this place. Look at it honestly. Do not romanticize it and do not diminish it. See it as it was. The long stretches where the path was unclear, and you were moving by instinct and faith rather than by sight. The places where the path narrowed until it was barely wide enough for one person, where the growth on either side pressed in close and you had to push through rather than walk freely. The places where you fell and the ground was hard, and getting up took longer than you thought it should. See all of that, and then notice something about the path. Notice that it did not stop. Notice that every difficult stretch eventually continued. Notice that you continued. That every time you fell, you got up. That every time the path narrowed, you found a way through. That every time the light was insufficient for what the path required, you moved forward anyway with what you had. Now turn and look forward. Look at what is on the other side of the threshold. And here is what I want you to notice. You cannot see all of it. The view extends far enough for clarity, and then it moves into a light that is too bright to look at directly. But what you can see in the territory that is visible is different in quality from everything you have been moving through. It is more open. The path is wider. The atmosphere is different. There is a quality to it that you recognize, not because you have been there before, but because some deep part of you has been moving toward exactly this for the entirety of the journey. And now I want you to notice the most important thing of all. You are not standing in front of the threshold waiting for permission to cross it. You are standing on it. Your feet are already at the line. The crossing is not a future event that requires something more from you before it can begin. The crossing is already happening. You are already in the middle of it. The threshold is beneath your feet right now, in this moment, and the territory you have been walking toward is already beginning to receive you. Come back to where you are. Open your eyes if they were closed, and let me say this to you as directly and personally as I know how to say it. You made it, not to the finish line, because the finish line is not what is ahead of you. What is ahead of you is more life, more purpose, more impact, more depth, more genuine connection than the waiting season has allowed you to access. But you made it through the part that was designed to make you give up. You made it through the part that was designed to convince you that you were ordinary, that the vision was too large, that the waiting was punishment rather than preparation, that the silence of heaven was indifference rather than the particular silence of a craftsman who is entirely focused on what they are making. You made it through all of that, and you did not come out of it the same person who went in. You came out of it a cycle breaker, someone who will not pass forward what they were given to transform, someone whose children, literal or spiritual, will begin their stories at a higher elevation because of the altitude you climbed in this season. Someone whose presence in a room shifts something that would not shift without them. Someone who carries, in the very fabric of who they have become, the proof that the long season produces something that the easy path could never have manufactured. I want to speak a blessing over you now, quietly and personally. The way you speak something over a person when you want it to reach them rather than simply sound impressive. May the endurance you developed in the waiting become the very quality that others recognize as strength when you lead. May the loneliness you carried in the long season produce in you a compassion that seeks out the person in the room who is carrying it now and knows exactly what to say. May the dreams you stopped saying out loud find their voice again, louder this time, more certain, because the person speaking them now has been tested and has not been found to be someone who gives up. May The relationships that are coming toward you carry the quality of being truly seen because you have become a person whose depth can recognize depth. May the provision that is opening in front of you arrive with an ease that surprises you, because ease is what happens when you are finally walking in the territory that was always yours. And may you cross this threshold, not with hesitation or with the residual guilt of someone who feels they should have arrived sooner, but with the quiet, grounded, unshakable confidence of a person who knows that they are exactly where they were always going to be, and that this is only the beginning of what that means. There is a moment that comes in every long journey where the traveler stops calculating the distance they have covered and starts moving differently. Not faster necessarily, and not with more effort, but with a different quality of intention. A quality that comes from knowing, at a level below strategy and above mere feeling, that the destination is no longer theoretical, that it is real and it is close, and the movement required now is not the grinding endurance of the middle miles, but the focused, deliberate, eyes open advance of someone who can see the outline of where they are going and understands that what is required of them in this final stretch is different from what was required in the long seasons before it. You are in that stretch now. And what I want to give you in this part of what we are building together is not more encouragement to keep going. You do not need that. You have been keeping going through seasons that would have stopped most people, and the fact that you are here at this specific point, in this specific message, as evidence that endurance is not something you are lacking. What you need now is something more specific. You need to know what to do with your hands. You need the practical, concrete, actionable shape of what felt this looks like in this particular season, when the shifts are beginning and the threshold is beneath your feet and the territory ahead is becoming visible, even as the full picture remains just beyond what your current vantage point allows you to see. So I want to talk to you now about 3 specific areas of your life and what active, faithful, present tense participation looks like in each one. Because the chosen one, who understands that their season is turning, does not simply wait for the external evidence to catch up with the internal knowing. They begin to move in the direction of what they sense is coming, not out of impatience or a need to force the timeline, but out of the understanding that alignment between inner conviction and outer action is what creates the conditions in which the provision can actually land. The first area is your relationships, and the specific action I want to invite you into here is what I am going to call intentional presence. In the waiting season, many of you have been relationally depleted in a way that made genuine presence difficult. You were managing so much internally that the bandwidth available for real, open, vulnerable connection with other people was significantly reduced. And there is no shame in that. Survival requires a particular allocation of resources, and the interior work of staying anchored in a long season takes up real energy that would otherwise be available for relationship. But the season is turning, and the relationships that are going to matter most in the chapter ahead require a version of you that is more present, more available, more willing to be seen without the protective distance that the waiting season taught you to maintain. The practical action here is simple but not easy. In the next 7 days, I want you to identify one person in your current life, not someone new, someone who is already there, who has been reaching toward you in ways that you have not fully met. Someone who has shown up for you in the quiet ways that the long season makes easy to overlook. A message that went unanswered longer than it should have. An invitation to connect that you declined because you were not in a good enough place to show up authentically. A conversation that was interrupted by your own interior noise before it could reach the depth it was trying to reach. I want you to go toward that person this week, not with a grand gesture, not with an explanation or an apology that centers your own process, simply with presence, a genuine, unhurried, "I am here and I am glad you are here" quality of attention that communicates what you perhaps have not communicated clearly enough in recent months, which is that the people who showed up for you in the hard season are exactly the people you want to be close to in the fruitful one. And alongside that, I want you to begin practicing what I call open-handed receiving. When something good comes toward you in a relationship, when someone offers you a kindness or a recognition or an expression of care, I want you to practice receiving it without immediately deflecting it, minimizing it, or redirecting the conversation away from yourself. The waiting season can produce a particular kind of relational posture, where receiving feels dangerous, where being seen in a positive light creates a kind of anxiety because you have not yet integrated the version of yourself that deserves good things. Begin practicing the simple act of receiving well, of saying thank you and meaning it, and letting the kindness land without immediately deflecting it back. This is a small practice with large consequences, because the person who learns to receive in the small relational moments is the same person who will be able to receive in the larger moments of provision and recognition that are coming. The second area is your purpose, and the specific action I want to invite you into here is what I am going to call the one-step commitment. I spoke in the previous section about the one clear step that is beginning to surface for you, the quiet, obvious, settled knowing about what the next movement in the direction of your calling looks like. And I said that what the chosen one in this season needs to do is take that step without waiting for the full staircase to be visible. I want to be more specific now about what that commitment looks like practically. The one-step commitment is not a vision board or a goal statement or a 5-year plan. It is a single, specific, doable action that you can take in the physical world within the next 48 hours that moves you in the direction of the thing you know you are called to. It might be making a phone call you have been putting off for 6 months. It might be opening a document and writing the first paragraph of the thing you have been waiting until you felt ready to write. It might be saying yes to an invitation that your fear has been dressing up as wisdom in order to keep you from accepting it. It might be registering for something, applying for something, reaching out to someone, beginning something, finishing something that has been sitting at 90% completion, because completing it requires you to release it, and releasing it requires you to be willing to be seen. Whatever the one step is, I want you to write it down right now, physically, in a notebook or on a piece of paper or in the notes application on your phone. Write it in the simplest possible language, as a single sentence that begins with the words "I will." Not "I should," not "I hope to," not "I am going to try to," "I will." And then beneath that sentence, I want you to write the specific moment in the next 48 hours when you are going to do it. Not the day, the moment, the hour. Because a commitment without a time attached to it is a wish dressed in the language of intention. And what you are building in this season is not wishes. You are building the specific, embodied, present tense faithfulness that is the human side of the partnership between your effort and the provision that is moving toward you. The third area is your interior life, and specifically the practice of what I am going to call tending the signal. Throughout this message, I have been pointing you toward the quiet, interior knowing that exists beneath the noise of ordinary consciousness, the frequency of insight and creativity and inspired knowing that the research of Dr. James Rivers and the ancient wisdom of every tradition that understood the architecture of the human spirit both point toward as the source of the chosen, one's most essential guidance. And I have given you the practical tool of the genius wave as the instrument that was built to help you access that frequency consistently and reliably. But I want to say something now about the interior discipline that surrounds the tool, because the tool works best in a life that is also being tended in the spaces between the 7 minutes. Tending the signal means protecting the quality of your interior life with the same intentionality that you would protect something genuinely precious. It means being increasingly selective about what you allow to occupy your attention and your emotional bandwidth. It means recognizing that every hour you spend consuming content that generates anxiety or comparison, or the low-grade despair of watching other people appear to be succeeding at things you are still striving toward, is an hour in which the signal is being buried under static. This is not a call to disengage from the world or to cultivate a kind of spiritual bubble that insulates you from reality. It is a call to be honest about the quality of what you are feeding your attention and your emotional body, and to begin making different choices where those choices are available to you. Spend more time in the kinds of inputs that leave you feeling more like yourself rather than less. More time in nature if nature does the work. More time in music that opens something in you rather than numbing something. More time in conversations that move toward depth rather than surface. More time in the specific quality of silence that step 3 of the return produces, that active, receptive, open stillness in which the frequency that carries your most essential guidance can finally be heard. And use the tool. Use the genius wave with the consistency that daily practices require in order to produce cumulative results. 7 minutes every day is less than 1% of your waking hours. And what that 1% produces, when it is the specific, scientifically calibrated, research-backed 7 minutes that Dr. Rivers built, is access to the neurological state in which the chosen one's most essential capacities, creativity, intuition, the ability to perceive pattern and possibility in the material of their life, are most available and most operative. The tool is not magic, but it works in the same way that any genuine tool works, which is that consistent use in the hands of someone who is already committed to the direction it supports, produces results that would not have been possible without it. For those of you who have already taken that step, who have already followed the link in the pinned comment and made the decision to invest $39 and 90 days of daily practice in the specific neurological support that this season of your life requires, I want to say this directly. You made a good decision, not because the tool is infallible, or because the next 90 days are going to be without difficulty or confusion, but because you made the decision to take your own interior life seriously enough to invest in it. And that quality of self-investment, the willingness to treat your own formation and your own flourishing as something worth the expenditure of real resources, is itself a signal to the universe and to your own nervous system that you believe something is worth building. And what you believe is worth building tends to attract the specific materials that building requires. For those of you who are still considering it, I want to leave you with one simple question. If the version of you that exists 90 days from now, the version that has been using this tool consistently, that has been showing up for the daily 7 minutes, that has been combining the neurological support of brainwave entrainment with the 3 steps of the return and the frameworks we have built together in this message, if that version of you looked back at this moment, at the moment where You were sitting with the decision and weighing the $39 against the possibility. What would they want you to do right now? You already know the answer, and the person who acts on what they already know is the person who arrives at the version of themselves they were always meant to become. I want to begin this final part by acknowledging something that I do not take lightly. You stayed through 10 parts of a message that asked you to feel things you have been working hard not to feel, to name things you have been careful not to name, to sit with the full honest weight of what a long waiting season actually costs a person, and then to receive the reframe not as a way of bypassing the pain, but as a way of holding it inside a larger and truer story. You stayed. And I do not know your specific circumstances. I do not know how many years the waiting has been for you, or what specific shape the losses have taken, or how close you have come in the difficult moments to simply letting go of the belief that the promise was ever real. But I know that you are here at the end of this message, which means some part of you decided that staying was worth it. And that part of you, the part that keeps showing up even when showing up requires something it is not sure it has. That part is the most important thing about you. That is the part that the long season could not erode, and it is the part that the season ahead is going to use most. I want to take one more moment with you before we close, because there is something I need you to do, not as a spiritual exercise and not as a motivational technique, as an act of genuine release, the kind that changes the quality of the next step because it changes the weight you are carrying when you take it. I want you to picture something. Picture yourself standing at the threshold we described earlier. The one that we established is already beneath your feet. And I want you to look down at your hands. Look at what you are carrying. Not metaphorically, but actually picture it. The grief of the years that felt wasted. The shame of the dreams you stopped saying out loud. The accumulated weight of the misunderstandings and the missed opportunities. And the nights when the silence was so heavy that it felt physical. The self-doubt that the long season carved into you through repetition. The comparisons that you have been carrying like stones in your pockets. The constant low-grade awareness of where everyone else appears to be in relation to where you are. Look at all of it. Let yourself see how much you are actually carrying, because most people in a long season become so accustomed to the weight that they stop noticing it as a separate thing from themselves. They begin to experience the weight as their identity rather than as a burden they have been carrying on top of their identity. Now I want you to picture setting it down, not throwing it away, because these things are part of your story, and your story is not something to be discarded, but setting it down at the threshold, leaving it behind on the ground of the season that is ending, and stepping forward without it. Stepping into the territory ahead with your hands empty and open, which is the only posture in which they are able to receive what is coming toward them. The grief stays at the threshold. The shame stays at the threshold. The self-doubt stays at the threshold. The comparisons stay at the threshold. You cross into what is ahead, carrying nothing from the waiting season, except the things that the waiting season built into the substance of who you are. The endurance and the depth and the compassion and the unshakable, knowing that survived everything that tried to silence it. You cross as a cycle breaker. You cross as someone who has been assembled by the kava of a long season and is now standing in the fullness of their kairos moment. You cross as the person that Dr. James Rivers was thinking of when he built the tool that helps the brain access the frequency at which its highest capacities operate, because that tool was not built for people who have everything working. It was built for people who have been carrying too much for too long. and who need the specific neurological support of a brain that has been guided into a state of open, creative, receptive clarity. You cross with the one clear step written down and the 48-hour commitment made. You cross with the relational landscape in the process of clearing and repopulating with people who belong to the chapter that is opening. You cross with the provision beginning to move towards you in ways that will surprise you with their timing and their specificity. And you do not cross alone. That is the thing I want to make sure you hear clearly before this message ends. All across this world, right now, in cities and towns and small rooms and large ones, on different continents and in different time zones, there are other chosen ones who are receiving this exact message at the exact point in their own journey that corresponds to yours. They are sitting in cars and in kitchens and on the floors of apartments and in the parking lots of jobs that do not match the size of what they were made for. They are in the middle of their own long waiting season, or they are standing at their own threshold, or they are just beginning to feel the first faint signs of the shift that you are already recognizing in your own life. And all of them are coming to this message the same way you did, not by accident, not by the random workings of an algorithm, but because something that is older and more intentional than technology found them at the moment when they were ready to be found. You are not navigating this alone. You are part of a community of people who are waking up at the same time, who are being released from the same kinds of long seasons at the same moment in history, who are being prepared for a collective impact that requires each individual member of the company to have gone through exactly the kind of formation you have been going through. The chosen ones do not emerge in isolation. They emerge in a generation, a specific moment in time when the world requires something that only people who have been through the fire of a long season can carry. And this is that generation. This is that moment. And you are one of the ones who was made for it. I want to ask you one final thing before I let you go, and it is both the simplest and the most significant thing I have asked of you in this entire message. I want you to share it. Not for my sake, and not for the numbers that this channel tracks, and not because social media engagement is the thing that matters most in the economy of what we are building here. I want you to share it because there is someone in your life right now who is in the darkest part of the waiting season. Someone who woke up this morning without a framework for what they are going through. Someone who has been reading their delay as rejection, their confusion as inadequacy, their prolonged season as evidence that they were wrong about themselves. Someone who needs someone to name it for them. And you can be that person. Not by being their spiritual director or their counselor or their answer. Simply by forwarding this message and letting the words do what they were built to do. If you have found value in what we have built together across these 10 parts, I want to ask you to like this video before you close it, not as a transaction but as an act of affirmation, a way of saying, yes, this was worth my time. This reached something real in me. Subscribe if you want to stay inside this community of people who are in the process of waking up to the fullness of what they were made for. And if you are in a position to support this work financially, the donate option exists and is genuinely appreciated because creating this kind of content takes the same quality of sustained investment that everything worth building requires. Every contribution, regardless of size, makes it possible to reach another chosen one who is waking into their Monday without anyone to name it for them. And for those of you for whom the genius wave presents itself somewhere in the middle of this message, not as a product being sold to you, but as something that resonated with a need you already knew you had, I want to mention it one final time without pressure and without urgency. If you know it is a yes, if something in you settled when I described the science of brainwave entrainment and the specific research of Dr. James Rivers and the 90-day commitment to daily 7-minute practice, then the link is in the pinned comment below this video, and it is waiting for you there at $39 with the 90-day money-back guarantee intact. Not because I need you to click it, but because if it is genuinely the tool for this moment in your life, then the only thing standing between you and using it is the decision to act on what you already know. Go into what is next with the weight set down at the threshold where it belongs. Go with your hands open. Go with the knowing that survived the long season still intact and now more trusted than it has been in years. Go as someone who has been seen clearly and named truly and blessed genuinely. And know that wherever the next step takes you, whatever the territory ahead requires of the persons you have become, you were built for it. The season built you for it, and the season knew what it was doing. You are the chosen one. You always were. And now, finally, you know it in a way that the waiting could not undo and the world cannot take back.